The sky burned in flashes behind the clouds as Private First Class James Kanar slammed into the ground, his parachute jerking violently before collapsing in the wet grass. His boots hit uneven soil. The jolt shot pain through his ankle. Cold mist clung to his face and hands. The scent of manure thick in his nostrils. Hedgerow country. Machine gun fire stitched the horizon in erratic bursts, and the sky above still glowed faint orange from scattered flak bursts. A few paratroopers screamed mid-air. Others were already silent. Kanar was 21, a radio operator in the 101st Airborne, now without a radio, map, or bearings. He'd dropped into a nightmare, alone. The moon was smothered by clouds, offering no help. Somewhere behind him, someone landed hard. A thud, a groan, then silence. He gripped his M1 carbine tighter, ears tuned to every rustle. His helmet was gone, ripped off during descent. Sweat mixed with soil on his forehead. A single cow lowed in the distance, then nothing. He was surrounded by tall hedgerows, twisted and thick like fortress walls. Orientation was impossible. No compass, no squad leader, no voice. Only shadows moved, or seemed to. He blinked fast, trying to make out shapes in the black. Training meant nothing now. Doctrine meant less. Every footstep had weight, every second could be his last. The air was thick with damp vegetation, gunpowder, and the metallic taste of fear. He crouched low, back to a stump, breathing through clenched teeth. Somewhere ahead, branches snapped, slow, intentional. He brought the rifle up but didn't fire. Orders had been clear. No shouting, no signals. Radios were unreliable. Whispered passwords were too dangerous in the dark. The wrong voice could get you killed. Then he remembered. Inside his breast pocket, still dry, was a small brass object no bigger than a matchbox. He pulled it out with a shaking hand. The cricket. 1 click for "Who goes there?" 2 for "Friend." It had seemed like a joke when they issued it. A child's toy, they said. But he pressed it once. Click. Silence followed. Then, faintly, too far. Movement again. Maybe boots in wet leaves. Maybe someone dragging a weapon. His heart pounded louder than the gunfire now. He clicked again. Once. Still nothing. No response. His trigger finger tightened. A figure shifted in the dark ahead. He couldn't breathe. The wind shifted, carrying the sour smell of sweat, grease, and wet canvas. The figure stepped forward. He clicked one last time. 2 sharp clicks answered from behind a bush to the left. Not the figure. Someone else. Friendly. The shape in front of him froze, then ducked and ran. No gunfire, just a splash and vanish into deeper shadow. Whoever it was, they hadn't wanted to be identified. Kanar stood slowly, blood still roaring in his ears. He moved toward the answering signal, crouched low, whisper quiet. A gloved hand reached from the brush. American uniform, face painted black. Another paratrooper. Wide eyes, mouth tight, rifle ready. They nodded once. The toy had just saved both their lives. From somewhere far behind, a flare burst above the treetops, red, then white. Screams echoed. A truck engine revved. Then gunfire again. Too close. Kanar and the other paratrooper slid into the hedgerows without a word. The clicker stayed tight in his palm. The invasion had begun, and radios were dead. The only voice left now was the sound of a child's toy, sharp and metallic in the dark. The invasion was supposed to be precise. Drop zones marked, units grouped, radio frequencies coordinated. But the wind betrayed them, and German flak turned planning into chaos. Planes scattered, altitude misjudged. Some stick groups jumped too early, others too late, and many plummeted straight into enemy-held swamps. The 101st and 82nd were now broken into fragments, scattered across orchards, ditches, and mine-riddled pastures. The map made sense only in London. On the ground, it was lies. Kanar moved with the others, silent beneath thick trees, dripping with dew. The paratrooper who'd answered his cricket gave only his first name, Doyle. The two picked up another man hiding in a root hollow, then two more limping near a ditch. No ranks, no orders, just breathing and weapons. Their boots squelched through soaked fields as the moon blinked behind shifting clouds. Everyone smelled of parachute silk, sweat, and cordite. The world was reduced to senses. One wrong word meant death. Radios had failed within minutes. Batteries had shorted from seawater. Static drowned everything. Squad leaders yelled into broken sets with no reply. Whispered passwords were useless in the black. Too many voices had unfamiliar accents, and panic made speech indistinct. Already one man had been shot after giving the wrong word, his voice too hoarse, his breath too fast. He never got the second syllable out. They buried him in silence, without knowing his name. German patrols moved fast, better equipped, and intimately familiar with the terrain. They used the same roads paratroopers were told to avoid. Their boots sounded different. A faster rhythm, sharper heels. But in mud, sound blurred. One squad from the 501st opened fire on figures in hedgerow mist, thinking they were enemies. After the first body fell, a man screamed in English. Two died before the shouting stopped. Friendly fire wasn't rare. It was routine. Every hedgerow acted like a wall, every orchard a maze. Visibility dropped to 5 feet in fog or brush. Orientation vanished. Even the stars, once used for navigation, disappeared behind smoke and clouds. The cries of sheep mingled with the echoes of rifle shots. Somewhere nearby, a barn burned. Orange light flickered across fields, but no one moved toward it. Flames meant exposure. Exposure meant death. Kanar's group reached a ruined stone wall, its mortar crumbling and slick with moss. They ducked low, sharing breath. One man, bleeding from a torn parachute harness, muttered that his squad had dropped near a canal, waist-deep in freezing water, half of them drowned before cutting loose. Another said his lieutenant had broken both legs on landing and given him the map before blacking out. No one knew where command was. No one knew if the beaches had been reached. All they had was what they carried and the few they trusted beside them. The real danger wasn't the enemy, it was confusion. Fear made men twitchy. Darkness turned nerves into hair triggers. Misidentification was a bullet away. Any movement in the hedgerows could be a Nazi with a bayonet or a medic searching for friends. One twitch, one misread signal, and blood hit the grass. Doctrines collapsed. Radios, orders, chain of command. Useless. The invasion's first hours weren't a battle. They were a blind crawl through confusion, with death hidden in every tree. But in that disorder, something strange began to form. Kanar noticed it first. Patterns. When he clicked once, some men clicked back. Others didn't. Those who answered were alive, alert, afraid, but in control. The clicker created certainty, not in strategy, but in identity. In the war's noisiest night, the only thing that cut through the madness was a child's toy, sharper than orders, clearer than passwords, faster than radios. And it was only beginning to spread. The first time Kanar saw the cricket, it was handed to him without ceremony. A stubby staff sergeant tossed one onto his cot before briefing, saying only, "Don't lose it." The object barely weighed an ounce. Brass, square-edged, no markings, cold to the touch. When pressed, it made a single metallic snap, sharp and fast like a beetle's chirp. It sounded like a joke, but no one laughed. Not in the final hours before the drop. Word spread in whispers. These clickers weren't standard issue. They weren't in manuals. Some platoons never got them. Others were handed out by officers acting on instinct, not orders. The idea had crept in sideways, not from high command, but from drills gone wrong. During night maneuvers in Wiltshire, units kept mistaking their own men for the enemy. It had nearly ended in a court-martial when a corporal opened fire on his captain in a barn. The captain survived. The mistake didn't. Major General Maxwell Taylor had taken it personally. He hated inefficiency more than insubordination. One night, during a planning session with British liaison officers, someone, no one remembered who, mentioned that children used metal clickers to call each other during games. Taylor didn't laugh. He ordered a box of them from a novelty supplier in Birmingham the next morning. They weren't weapons. They weren't regulation. But they worked. Kanar had kept his close, practicing the click pattern under his breath in the troop transport. 1 click to ask, 2 clicks to reply. It was silent to the Germans, unmistakable to Americans. The sound cut through nerves, through noise, through night. It didn't require batteries, didn't jam, didn't betray position like a flashlight or whispered voice. Some NCOs mocked the idea. Others refused to distribute them. One lieutenant called them circus trash and tossed his out the window. But the men who understood fear, the ones who'd survived Sicily or Salerno, kept them close. Kanar didn't question it. He had already seen men shoot at shadows. If this toy gave him a second's hesitation, it was worth more than a rifle. Inside the aircraft, he'd fingered it as the red light blinked overhead. It calmed his pulse more than the morphine pack in his pocket. The engines roared, men vomited into their helmets, and chalk marks on their faces blurred with sweat. Yet the clicker never left his grip. Now, in Normandy's hedgerows, that choice echoed louder than the flak. The first time he'd used it, it saved his life. The second time, it formed a fire team. By the third, it became a ritual. Move 10 paces. Listen. Click once. Wait. If 2 clicks came, move. If not, stay low. Watch the dark. By Sautrianquois, Kanar's group had grown to 8. Not a unit, not a squad, just fragments glued by instinct and a common sound. One man had half a map, another carried extra grenades. None of them knew their objective, but the clicker kept them moving, kept them together. In a shallow ditch near a ruined well, they encountered another group, weapons drawn, eyes wide. The 2 sides froze. One movement would mean a firefight. Kanar didn't speak. He raised his hand and clicked once. From the other group, a man responded. 1 click. Pause. Then 2. Both sides relaxed, barely. A staff sergeant stepped forward and said, low and slow, "Bastogne, boys?" Kanar nodded. "Screaming eagles." They merged. Now 15 strong, they had wounded to carry and objectives to guess. Still no radios, still no command. But now they had a signal. One noise that said, "I'm one of you." And in a war built on silence, misfire, and broken comms, that sound became the start of something far larger than any of them realized. The fog deepened as they pushed east, soaking every sleeve, rifle sling, and patch of gauze. Kanar's boots squelched through cold, uneven soil, the terrain sloping suddenly into flooded cow paths and stone-covered ditches. His legs ached from crouching. Thorns tugged at sleeves and skin. The air reeked of crushed nettles and burnt diesel, while the distant flicker of flames pulsed behind the hedgerows like a heartbeat. The squad, if it could be called that, moved low, weapons raised, spaced 5 meters apart. No one spoke. A pig screamed somewhere in the dark, followed by a burst of automatic fire that didn't stop. It echoed, too long, too sustained. MG-42, German. They hit the dirt. Bark splintered from a tree ahead, spraying one man's helmet. Kanar pressed his body flat to the mud, chin against wet leaves. The machine gun stopped. Silence fell again, thicker than before. Somewhere beyond the trees, an American squad was being cut down. The men fanned out. A corporal motioned left with 2 fingers, then waved to Kanar. The signal was clear. Flank the position. Kanar moved through the brush, slow and breathless. Each step felt like dragging iron. The damp hedgerows blocked moonlight, turning the world to shifting black shapes and soft ground. He couldn't hear his own breath over his heartbeat. Suddenly, a figure rose ahead. Too tall, wrong gear. Not American. The shape paused, just 10 feet away, rifle barrel glinting. Kanar's finger found the trigger, but he hesitated. The figure didn't fire. For a second, the world froze. Kanar clicked, a single, deliberate click. No reply. The shape turned sharply, eyes wide. Not German, American. The man raised his own clicker, stunned, and snapped twice. Relief hit like a hammer. They almost killed each other. After that, they advanced together. They found more. Another paratrooper with a bloody sleeve crouching behind a tree stump, 2 engineers dragging a supply bag, a medic kneeling over a man who couldn't speak. None knew where they were. All answered the click. The squad grew with each signal. At a forked trail, they found their first true test. A shallow road, lined with brush and wire, flanked a destroyed barn. German helmets bobbed through the mist. 6, maybe 7 soldiers. A motorcycle idled nearby, engine soft and irregular. A sentry lit a cigarette, its glow hovering like a floating ember. The paratroopers waited. Clicks passed silently between men in the dark, hands tapping shoulders, orders whispered through lips tight with adrenaline. Kanar watched the corporal raise 2 fingers, then wave down. Attack in silence. Grenades went first. 2 arcs over the wall, then rifles barked. Screams tore through the air. The motorcycle toppled. 1 German fled into the brush and never reappeared. It was over in under 40 seconds. The squad scavenged for ammo and maps, dragging the wounded to cover. Blood ran down the road in small streams. 1 American had taken a round to the leg, bone showing beneath fabric, but he stayed conscious. The medic tied off the limb with trembling fingers. The clickers had prevented another friendly fire incident before the fight even started. By dawn, they had linked with others. Another dozen men from the 502nd, then stragglers from the 506th PIR. Every face was different, but the sound was always the same. Click, click, click. Like insects speaking through the grass. 30 men now moved together, not by rank, not by radio, but by trust formed through the simplest sound. The clicker had gone from a novelty to necessity, and soon it would be all they had. The fields shimmered with dawn haze, turning wet grass silver and every breath to steam. Frost clung to helmet straps. Gunmetal glinted faintly through the hedgerows, still wet with dew and blood. The crickets clicked like insects from another world, irregular, sharp, alive. Not 1 man spoke unless forced. Language had become dangerous, sound lethal. But this signal, 1 click, then 2, spread faster than fire. Kanar's group crossed a broken orchard fence and found a new face. A lieutenant with a torn map and a broken wrist, surrounded by 6 men from different units. Their uniforms were mismatched, boots muddy, sleeves rolled to tourniquets. He wasn't giving orders. He was following the clicks. When Kanar's team approached, 2 men raised rifles, ready to fire. Then came the single click. 2 quick answers. Guns lowered. Within minutes, the groups merged. They now had over 50 paratroopers. Most had never seen each other before. But they all carried one thing in common: the sound. They took shelter inside a collapsed stone chapel. Windows shattered, pews overturned. Someone placed an injured private on the altar, wrapping his leg in gauze torn from a dead man's jacket. The room smelled of wet stone, rust, and pine sap. It could have been a hospital. It could have been a tomb. Kanar stood outside near the doorway, watching another squad approach through the brush. No formation, no signal, just fear in motion. He clicked once, low and sharp. 3 men froze. 1 clicked back, fast. Safe. Inside an hour, the group swelled again. Now over 70 soldiers from 5 companies. No officers above lieutenant. No radios functioning. A single signal ran through them all. Click, click, click. Silent confirmation in the dark. Supply runners passed word along muddy farm roads. Clickers are working. Use them. Keep moving east. Medics began tying clickers to their jackets with wire, attaching them to belt loops or grenade pins. A few men with mechanical skills stripped broken ones for parts, rewiring the internals to get them working again. Others started crafting their own, bent spoons, crushed lighters, coin-click hacks, anything to mimic the sound. Word filtered to a signal sergeant near a crashed glider who had salvaged a small pile of clickers from a lost supply crate. He began handing them out to wounded officers, telling them the code and pointing toward the sound. The distribution spread like rumor, like instinct. Command had no idea it was happening. The main radio net at Utah Beach remained clogged with static and panic. Official reports marked dozens of platoons as missing, presumed scattered, or confirmed lost. In truth, many had already regrouped using nothing but breath and brass. Kanar moved through a narrow trail past dead cattle and blackened hedgerows. The air carried a burnt sweetness, scorched hay, diesel, flesh. A machine gun opened up nearby, sharp and unrelenting. Someone returned fire, then silence again. He ducked, moved forward, clicked once. 2 clicks, another face in the trees. They nodded, joined, moved as one. By 0700, nearly 600 paratroopers had reformed along the Merdere River line, not by rank, not by code books, but by clicks echoing through the bocage like a hidden frequency. In many zones, radios still sat silent. In others, officers refused to move until regrouped units arrived. And they arrived faster where the clicks were heard. Always faster. A toy had done what the Airborne network could not. It built an army from broken parts, and it was still gaining ground. Mist crawled low over the Merdere River, clinging to the causeway like ghost skin. Trees dripped in silence, the branches motionless under pale gray light. Beneath it all, mud, water, gunmetal, and breath. Lafayette Bridge was barely wide enough for a truck, bordered by a flooded meadow on one side and a sunken lane on the other. Somewhere beyond, German reinforcements waited. Armor, infantry, mortars. If they crossed, Utah Beach would be cut off before noon. Kanar crouched behind a fallen tree with 30 others. Mixed ranks, mixed units, no one in proper formation. The only link between them was sound. 1 click to signal, 2 to reply. The system held. As they waited, more arrived. Drenched, bloodied, eyes wide from combat. They came in silence, moving like hunters. Each man who joined was checked not by words or rank, but by the signal. 1 click, 2 clicks back. A paratrooper from the 508th had scouted the bridge hours earlier. He carried a hand-drawn map on the back of a K-ration box, smeared with blood and charcoal. It showed pillboxes near the tree line, MG-42 nests behind a broken cart, and 2 snipers dug into the farmhouse roof. A barbed wire barricade crossed the mouth of the bridge. No tanks. Not yet. The group had no working radios. Coordination depended on hand signs, whispers, and clicks. One man tied a signal mirror to his bayonet to reflect light toward other units assembling near the orchard wall. No reply came. Maybe they were already dead. Kanar moved with a fire team up the left flank. His rifle was heavy, slick with moisture. He had 7 rounds left. The corporal beside him tapped twice on his boot, then raised 3 fingers. Attack in 3. Kanar pressed the cricket once, not for his teammate, but for the soldiers across the ditch. 2 quick clicks came back. They were ready. The first grenade shattered the silence, an arc of smoke and fire landing just short of the MG nest. The second hit true. Dirt and metal exploded upward. Then came the shouting. Then the rifles. Then the charge. Paratroopers surged over the hedgerows, yelling now. No more stealth, no more clicks. Boots crashed through flooded grass. One man screamed and fell, clutching his throat. Another fired 2 bursts and hit the pillbox wall. A third took out the sniper with a lucky shot through a shattered window. Kanar advanced over corpses. German, American, impossible to tell in motion. A bullet whined past his ear. He didn't duck. No time. They hit the bridge at full sprint. Barbed wire tore at their legs. A flamethrower team lit the pillbox from 10 feet. Screams followed. A mortar shell landed short, blasting 3 into the air. Mud, bone, gear, all airborne for half a second. Then fire. Then silence. Through the haze, Kanar saw a paratrooper raise a hand to shoot. A shadow moved in front of him. Kanar clicked once. The soldier froze. 2 clicks came from the shadow. A medic, dragging a wounded man by the collar. The bullet never left the chamber. Without the cricket, he'd be dead. By 0641, the bridge was theirs. Smoke curled over the water. German bodies floated in the shallows, tangled in reeds and blood. A squadron of paratroopers stood motionless at the far end, eyes scanning for the next wave. But none came. Not yet. Kanar knelt by a wounded private, pressing gauze into a stomach wound. The man was silent, staring at nothing. A clicker hung from his neck, smeared with mud. He'd used it twice during the charge to avoid being shot by his own. Across the road, another squad raised a flag from a bent antenna pole. The cloth was torn, soaked, barely red, white, blue. But it was there. The bridge was held. Not by plans, not by radios, not by orders, by clickers, by men who listened. The sun broke through in strips, slicing gold across blackened trees and smoke pillars still rising from Lafayette. Dew steamed off collapsed helmets. Rifles hung loose in exhausted hands. Mud clung to every man's skin like dried blood. The silence that followed the assault was not peace. It was recoil. Kanar sat against a fence post, boots soaked, eyes wide but unseeing. His rifle lay beside him, untouched since the final burst. His fingers moved without command, checking ammo, wiping sweat, tightening the broken strap on his clicker. The brass toy was scratched, the corner bent, but it still worked. He pressed it once. It answered. 2 clicks. Nearby, someone still lived. Medics worked silently over the injured. Tourniquets twisted tighter. Morphine plunged into trembling legs. The smell of antiseptic mixed with blood and gunpowder. One man moaned under a tarp, whispering names no one knew. Another cried for water and then stopped speaking entirely. No one looked away. No one flinched anymore. A supply runner from the 501st reached the road. His boots dragged. A bandage covered half his face. He carried no orders, only information. He'd been told to find any working unit along the Murderay and report status. Kanar met him halfway, gave the casualty count, number of rifles, direction of retreating Germans, and the bridge's condition. No salute, no introduction, just facts. The runner scribbled on damp paper and nodded. Before leaving, the runner reached into his coat and pulled out a bundle wrapped in canvas. Inside, 12 clickers. He handed them over wordlessly and limped on. Kanar gave half to a corporal he barely knew, and the rest to a staff sergeant who'd lost his voice from shrapnel shock. The signal would continue. By noon, officers in field HQs were revising their maps. Names once listed as KIA were crossed out, replaced with recovered or confirmed engaged. Command had no idea why so many scattered paratroopers were reassembling so quickly, how bridges were being taken without coordination, or how pockets of resistance had become coordinated offensives. But Taylor knew. He read the reports in silence and traced his finger over a margin note that read, Clickers verified as primary ID method, confirmed effective. He underlined it once. Unofficial briefings spread across airborne units. In the field, new orders were quietly spoken. Don't fire unless no click. 1 and 2, nothing else. It wasn't formal doctrine, but it moved faster than paperwork. It traveled from lips to ears, through trees and smoke, between boots and bursts of fire. Kanar saw the shift unfold in real time. At a barn near Amfreville, 2 units nearly collided in fog. He heard a click from the left, then 2, then 3 more, cascading like code through the mist. No shots fired, no casualties, just motion, redirection, and survival. At 14:20, a sergeant from the 327th asked Kanar outright, "That your trick?" Kanar shook his head. "Just kept mine." The sergeant nodded once, then clicked. Another soldier across the field answered before the echo faded. The bridges were holding. More paratroopers arrived by the hour. Boats reached the causeway with fresh ammo. Engineers began reinforcing the road with steel sheets. The beachhead solidified, and the Germans began to pull back toward Carentan. But the real shift hadn't been strategic. It was behavioral. 100 fragmented groups had become a single organism, fast, quiet, coordinated, not by wires, not by flares, by instinct, sharpened through sound. A sound like no weapon, a sound like survival. The hedgerows stayed wet long after the Germans pulled back. Even as artillery rolled inland and tanks chewed through orchard walls, the morning mist returned each day like memory. It crept across the battlefield and settled on helmets, rifles, and the bent frames of gliders half swallowed by the earth. Wounded men were moved, positions shifted, maps changed. But the sound remained. No one ordered more clickers. They weren't in logistics reports. They weren't tracked by ordnance officers or requisitioned through supply chains, but they multiplied, passed from man to man, swapped, pocketed, imitated. By July, clickers appeared in Sicily, used unofficially by scouts ahead of patrols. By August, some had been welded into rifle stocks with wire. Crude, improvised, effective. Kanar carried his until Bastogne. It hung from his belt beside a folding knife and a stained field dressing. He never talked about it, never explained. Only used it when darkness fell and the trees turned unfriendly. He clicked it in the snow when muffled footsteps approached. Twice it stopped an ambush. Once it warned a medic before a frozen rifle lifted. It became reflex, silent, fast, unquestioned. In Belgium, a shrapnel fragment cracked the side of the device. It still worked. He never replaced it. By the time he returned to the States in 1945, Kanar was 23, leaner, quieter, with a limp that never fully healed. He said little during debriefings. Most of his reports were signed without comment. When asked about equipment, he wrote only one note. The cricket worked. He kept it in a tobacco tin in the bottom drawer of a steel filing cabinet in his attic. Years passed. The war became grainy photographs and parade floats. Medals were framed. Letters yellowed. But the clicker remained untouched, nestled between a compass and a broken dog tag that wasn't his. Kanar never joined veterans clubs, never spoke at schools. But every June he walked the same trail in a nearby forest at dawn. His daughter, watching from the window, thought he was hunting. He never brought a weapon. He just walked, boots crunching leaves, one hand brushing the tin in his coat pocket. Sometimes, faintly, she swore she heard a click. In 1997, after his funeral, his granddaughter found the tin. Inside was the brass cricket, scratched, dented, and still functional. Alongside it, a folded page from a field manual marked unauthorized. One sentence underlined in pencil. Recognize friend from foe. Do not speak unless certain. She donated the clicker to the National Wubby-Woo Museum. They placed it under glass beside a scorched patch of parachute silk and a photo of the Lafayette Bridge. The plaque read simply, "Identification device, Normandy, 1944. Used to reunite scattered units behind enemy lines." No spotlight, no fanfare. But veterans who passed that case sometimes stopped. They didn't speak, didn't read. They just smiled faintly, then kept walking. The sound was never loud. It didn't echo, it didn't explode, but it reached farther than any command, and it saved more than any one will ever count.